welcome again to Stephen Green on the record. And Stephen, you've been on the record in Kenya because you went out there for a conference and you made a film that has brought you fame but not fortune, maybe from the wrong people. What happened?
Hmm. No, it was a pro-family conference organised by Africa Christian Professionals Forum. That was last week, and they graciously invited me to speak in a session, which I duly did. And I used that session to explain how many anti-family NGOs were operating in Kenya and to trace their funding back to Western governments and foundations. So that was my contribution. Overall, the thing was wonderful and met a whole load of really nice people. Highly placed government officials as well as just ordinary folks, and it was very blessed. So that was Nairobi. That was last week. So yeah, I'm back in when Swahili is known as Taifa La Wales, the country of Wales in the United Kingdom.
Yes, and we mention NGOs, non-government organisations, but you wonder sometimes, what are they doing that is not good?
They are essentially all the various pro-abortion, pro-CSE, pro-sodomy NGOs all across the developing world are attempting to interfere in the internal affairs of the sovereign nations which are hosting them. But every single one is funded from the West. Not one of these NGOs involved in comprehensive sexuality education or abortion. We're talking about IPPF and Marie Stopes for abortion, so it's probably on its own. Or anti-family NGOs, the pro-gay ones. Every single one is supported by foreign foundations and governments. The UK, for example, in 2023 set aside £40 million for spreading LGBT around the globe. The United Kingdom government funds 90% of the totally illegal abortions carried out by Marie Stopes in Kenya. So there's a lot of money going in. There's Western foundations as well, one of which is in London and is perfectly open about how much money it gives to its client uh, um, pro-gay NGOs in Kenya. Not all of them, though, are so open, and it's impossible to know exactly how much money is going into them. They need transparency, and that's where I'm leading to.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to know where the government gets its money from. It's from me and you, whether we like it or not. But where does the average NGO get its money from? Well, let's name names. LGBT, our friends. Who funds them?
Well, yeah, do you know what? I made a video about this, Rodney. It is called something like hang on, I'll tell you what it's called. Here we go. It's called Foreign Agents Anti-Family NGOs in Kenya. That's Foreign Agents Anti-Family NGOs in Kenya. And the plain fact, Kenya is probably one of the worst nations for this. Nairobi is seething with them. And in the video, we went round to Nairobi. We went round to four of them four of them in Nairobi and Mombasa, and identified some of their staff and a lot of their funders. The funders, hey, look, we're talking about the Ford Foundation, the Bering Foundation, Open Society Foundation, started by George Soros, the Sigrid Rousing Trust in London. Now, her father, Hans Rousing, invented a Tetra Pak, which everything from oat drink to milk comes in these days, and he made a billion pounds, talking pounds and dollars, that sort of out of that. And he's left all his fortune to his daughter Sigrid, and she's set up a foundation to she concentrates on really environmentalism, what she calls justice, and LGBT rights. But I mean, bear in mind, there is no human right to abortion, or there's no human right to commit unnatural acts in any international human rights instrument. So they pretend there is. That's why the leading one in Kenya is called the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. it's not a commission. It's just a bunch of activists, and it's not human rights, but they try to pretend it is. It's really not national. It's just it's a foreign agent. It's supported by, I say, by Secret Rousing, Ford Foundation, Bering Foundation, COC in the Netherlands, HEVOS in the Netherlands. These are all a humanist. HEVOS is a humanist organization. The Stiftung Heinrich Boll, which is German for the Heinrich Boll Foundation. Diaconia from Sweden, the Danish Family Planning Association, the Canadian High Commission in Nairobi supports this NGL's HRC. So there's the Canadian government actively interfering in the internal affairs of Kenya, because these NGOs, they then bring legal action in the courts to overturn domestic laws. Meanwhile, others often, like Plan International, a $1 billion turnover NGO, is spreading the doctrines of pro-abortion, pro-gay, even pro-trans in its CSE programs. So it's, the thing is, it's corrupting, and I just want to know what right they think they have to interfere in the sovereign affairs of another nation. I mean, it would be, imagine the outrage if Kenya was interfering in the internal affairs of Canada.
Yeah.
It wouldn't stop, would it? So this is what's going on, and it's happening all over the developed world. So the British government is interfering in Sri Lanka, trying to get them to overturn historic laws upholding righteousness. And it's not even, so it's mainly Buddhist, that country. The Sinhalese are Buddhist. The Tamils in the north are Hindu. About 10% Christian though. So it's there is a Christian contingent there, mainly Catholic, of course, because the Portuguese. But there we are.
Blame the Portuguese. No, we don't really. Having said that, Stephen, you've got a situation here that is clearly dependent on the judiciary in what decisions they make. Now, whose side are they generally on?
Well, when you look at the British establishment, it's that they are all out. They appear to be all under the same woke mold. We looked recently at the General Medical Council, which gives a doctor starting it when the doctor decides, if a doctor decides that, for example, he is no longer a man but he is actually a woman, which the Supreme Court, of course, has just ruled against in London. Then the General Medical Council, they keep his original record, but they give him a new record with a new number. On the original one, they say this person is not allowed to practice medicine in the United Kingdom. On the new one, this person is under a girl's name. So it's the same person with the same qualifications, the same degrees, the same places. Everything's exactly the same except the name. And the fact that on the old record, they aren't allowed to practice medicine. On the new record, they are. It's very peculiar. So I'm like, well, okay. So the General Medical Council, that's 6 doctors and 6 lay people. Who voted for them? Well, actually, nobody. They were appointed by the Privy Council. And of course, the Privy Council is like sort of 700 right honourables. Everybody who's ever been a government minister is a right honourable. So it's not all of them that vote, it's a subcommittee. And then you have NHS England, NHS England has directors who are appointed from God knows where. Seriously, we don't know who appoints them. But then they appoint all the members of NHS trusts all over England. The Welsh ones and the Scottish ones are appointed by the Welsh and Scottish governments, respectively. But the ones in England are just appointed by NHS England. And it's always the same people whose faces fit in the corridors of power. And they're all, they're all sort of humanistic, even anti-Christian, woke people, sirs and dames and professors and doctors of this and that. And they are the people whose faces fit in the corridors of power. And it's so there's this quangocracy that really owes its being to nobody really, except there's people who appoint them. And there was a time you will read in the book of Judges, which in our Christian Voice Bible reading plan we have just left, and we're in First Samuel now, having read the book of Ruth. But in the Judges, at the end of Judges, you remember the verse. At that time, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Well, there's no king in the NHS in the shape of His Majesty's Secretary of State for Health. He doesn't get a look in because all the NHS trusts are independent and responsible only to themselves. That was set up as a bright idea, I think, by David Cameron or Tony Blair or something. They are lawless. It's bizarre, but that's how it operates. So you find the same mindset in governments in the West and in the Western foundations. Foundations like the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, Open Society for that matter, they all went sort of woke in the 1990s. Very peculiar. They all went woke at the same time. And it took a little while for some of the NGOs in Kenya to catch up. For example, the National Human Rights, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, that started off as a genuine human rights NGO. It went pro-gay in 2011, and that's when the money started pouring in. We know that the Ford Foundation gave them no less than $1 million, not Kenya shillings, dollars, in 2012 alone. And the money hasn't stopped pouring in. And that's without all the other Kenya NGOs and all the other funders. It's extraordinary. The Arcus Foundation, headed by John Stryker, a millionaire homosexual from Chicago, he's funding quite a few of them as well. There's a whole list of them on that video about the foreign agent NGOs in Kenya. But it's quite exciting because the video has stirred up the opposition.
Well, it has, because you've not got people giving you a thumbs up. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, but you see, you have to remember, this is one of the first rules of activism, is to remember that social media is not reality. The fact that you have all those negative people means that the woke the woke NGOs have got their people out in force. We've had comments from the program director at this National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. We've had a comment. In fact, I responded to her comment and called her out, and named her, and she then responded to that by deleting her comment. But not before I copied it into a little text file. That was a Masafu. So yeah, and then there were others. There was one guy, a homosexual guy, who won an award at an award ceremony. I was able to look him up, and the award ceremony was for the National Gay Lesbian Human Rights Commission, inevitably, and it was funded. Guess who it was funded? Guess who this award this award ceremony was funded by? Go on, have a stab. I'll give you a clue. It's a Western government with a high commission in Nairobi.
Oh my goodness me! Go on.
Yeah. The Canadian High Commission again. It's just it's like a cesspit. It's astonishing. Did you know this was disclosed to us during the conference last week? There is a group or a consortium of Western High Commissioners in Kenya. And from time to time, the whole bunch of them, this is just be the UK, Denmark, Norway, the whole lot, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Republic of Ireland, they go and they try and buttonhole one of the government ministers or civil servants. And the last time they did that, they found out actually that the government official that they picked on was actually very well informed, both on the subject and on what they were doing, and they left them alone because he was challenging them with what's happening in their own countries, and said, they said,
any of these comments, Stephen, that have been made, can any of them be construed as being hate speech?
No, I'm sure they can, but I just do. That's not somewhere I go. I'm not. It's much more. I'm not going to to throw a hissy fit because people have left comments on the video. I just respond to them as politely as one can. I had one lady who was saying, well, I say lady, one young woman was saying, hey, well, there's homosexuality in a queer relationship. She said in the Bible. Look at David and Jonathan, or Naomi and Ruth. I mean, you know, laugh out loud stuff. This is, I mean, the comments like that say more about the people who make them than they do about two warriors or a mother and her daughter-in-law in ancient Israel. I tell you.
Yeah, it seems to be very well organized from the opposition camp. It's a pity the Christian church isn't as organized or can't put any money into countering these lies.
I mean, I don't actually. Um, Both Christian Voice UK and Kenya Christian Voice are both organisations which stand for Beyond Aid and Africa First. In other words, Africa needs to develop and industrialize and start processing its raw materials rather than sort of giving them to the EU or to China to process. So there is that. We want really to move beyond this situation where where the white man just pitches up with money and gives it to them. That's just got to stop. Has to stop. And of course, I mean, China and India have come from nowhere in the last 25, 30 years to be economic powerhouses. There's no reason why, with the correct funding for blast furnaces, refineries, smelting plants, all the other stuff that we take for granted here. Well, we used to take for granted in the UK that they can't do it now because energy costs too much. But apart from that, there's no reason why countries in Africa can't aspire to the same standards and the same. I'm not talking about immoral standards. I'm talking about economic progress. I mean, on the other hand, you don't want to have a situation where everybody's moving to the city, but then that's happening anyway because, for example, in Kenya, coffee plantations are being sort of left idle because there's no money in it, and so there's a lot that needs to be fixed. Okay, and people aren't going to invest in Africa until they know that they can get their money out. And that there is stability. Obviously, they know that there is that, but nevertheless, Africa needs to move beyond aid, and sort of the whole aid edifice starts to crumble. That
And
is
the
my prayer.
church over there, is it positive or negative about this situation, or does it keep stum?
Well, I was in the Anglican Cathedral of Nairobi, All Saints Cathedral, on Sunday morning. We heard a really powerful prophetic speech. The Anglican Church doesn't sort of concentrate on specific policies. A lot is done in allegory, but the people all know what's being said and who is and which government ministry is being targeted at, because they're all laughing when the pastor makes a certain sort of key joke or comment. They all get it. Don't worry. But no, when there was a lot of trouble with people being just picked off the streets by security forces in Kenya, and the Anglican Church, Catholics, Pentecostals all came out solidly against that and denounced the government for that. So the Anglican Church in Kenya, in particular, is highly prophetic and speaking into current affairs. And as for woke NGOs financed by Western money, they are not impressed with that. Let me say that. Um, of course, the same sort of people from these pro-gay NGOs were denouncing the conference of the Pan Africa pro-family conference run by African Christian professionals last week. They were denouncing that. But when you trace it back, it's just the usual suspects. It's just the people involved in the NGOs that you would expect to. So, in other words, vested interests are coming out. And we have to set our faces like a flint and not be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of their faces, I think Ezekiel says, because the Lord is with you. So yeah, there's a lot of this sort of hot air goes on, particularly on social media, and you have to sort of just rise above it and know what exactly is going on.
That leads us coming back to Britain, hot air, social media. and even the States initially. There was a very interesting interview on GB News last night. They got hold of a chappie called Charlie Kirk, and Charlie has the ear of the Donald, and they get on, and he's got a lot of influence, and it's come from his podcasting and various things. And he's got millions of people on his various sites. You've gone, Stephen. You're
I'm
back.
back now. You went.
Oh, right, back again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he's got millions of people that tune in regularly. So he's a traditional influencer. And they got talking, the interviewer and him, and he said, what's happened to Britain? What do you mean? Well, you're just a husk of a nation. You're a conquered nation compared with what you used to be. Everybody looks up and admires you. And at the moment, it's just a joke. He went further. He said, the Church of England wants to wake up. He put it in different language, but that was it. And the interviewer thought, oh, what's he going to go on about now? He said, basically, Great Britain, if you want to know what's wrong, has forgotten its spirituality, which in the past, historically, has maintained a moral compass. Now it ain't there. And the C of E, being the nation's church, inverted comma, are just letting it happen. And we're not going to get anywhere, old phrase I know, except by coming back to God. Very interesting.
Well, it was Tony Blair's government, wasn't it? It was Alistair Campbell who started this rot when Tony Blair in an interview was asked about something spiritual, and Campbell, of course, vowed atheist, said, "Sorry, we don't do God." He said. Now Tony Blair has since said that that was wrong, that the government should do God, but the seed was sown, and now you can find somebody like Kemi Badenoch turned up at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship in February, gave a speech about returning to the foundations. Now, the foundation of our nation is the Christian faith. Our king kissed the Holy Bible and promised to maintain the laws of God at his coronation in May 2023. So that's where we are. So what was our foundations for Kemi? Democracy and the rule of law. And that was about it. She did not mention Christianity or Jesus Christ or Christian constitution once in her speech. So if the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't do God, the leader of Reform Party doesn't do God, then we are trying to solve the puzzle with only half the pieces, because everything, Rodney, as you know, has a spiritual dimension, and politics is not an exception. That there is a spiritual dimension to it, and when you see some of our politicians giving away the national sovereignty, for instance, it's almost an act of treason. And there is a spiritual dimension to that as well. You'll remember from the books of Kings and Chronicles that at one time, either King Asa or King Josiah passed a law that anybody who would not worship the God of Israel, Jehovah, will be put to death. Now that sounds extreme to us, but there was a time when treason in the United Kingdom carried the death penalty, and that was seen by them as treason. And they're teaching us a lesson there, because whatever you worship is going to influence your legal system. So if you worship the Almighty, you're going to pass biblical laws based at least on the Bible. If you become atheistic, you'll pass laws based on your own preconceptions. If you become Muslim, you'll pass laws based on the Quran thing. So that's how it works. There is a spiritual dimension which we ignore to our peril. And I keep saying that with all the small boats that coming across the channel carrying migrants of military age. If anybody thinks you can counter the threat of Islam, and there are no end of threats being documented from Islamic scholars now in the UK, imams and all sorts of people. If you think you can counter that threat from Islam with secularism, you're deluding yourself. It's only the King of Kings has the power to to defeat that. But it means our lot need to repent and turn back to the King of Kings. They need to be, keep saying they need to be, this is Exodus chapter 18, verse 21, they need to be able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Got ability, God-fearing, truthful men who don't do greed, who look out for, basically, who look out for the people, not themselves.
It doesn't in any way match the average politician, your definition there. But having said that, lastly, Charlie Kirk went on to say, clearly Britain is not in the right place. And what will happen since Britain has rejected its founder, God? It will leave a vacuum. First of all, Marxism will come in to fill that vacuum. And in fact, it's already there in the civil service and out of the civil service, in Parliament and out of Parliament. And the third thing will happen when that fails, as it will, because it's never succeeded in any takeover of any nation. The third thing is Islam. Oh, well, there's some good Muslims. Well, yes, he said, but it's not that. It's the fact that the culture will be altered absolutely, and is being done so today. People are not learning now the language, and without language, you ain't got culture. There's lots happening that is not good, and Islam is just waiting for this to explode, and they'll step in. Not a good future, pretty bleak, in fact.
Got a problem here. I don't even say challenge. The big problem is that, of course, that the our lot, our establishment, our elite are so spineless. They're almost, they. I think the problem is, the problem is that the elite so hate Christianity that they brought in multiculturalism, and multiculturalism is just a code for allowing Islam to come in. I mean, nobody's worried about the Hindus; they just get on, get on with making money. But the Muslims are bent on world domination because that is what their religion teaches them that they should be doing. So they come in and they will quickly assume positions of power. I mean, look, the same thing happens in Kenya near the coast. 41% of the population of the coast in Kenya is Muslim. That's historical from Arab trading, including slave trading and commerce along the coast. So the big, heavy Islamic influence on there. But the Muslims control virtually all the levers of power along the coast in the county and regional governments. MPs tend to be Muslim, and the Christians are left behind because we don't have a sort of a voting bloc. The Muslims do it instinctively, but we don't, and we need to. And too many of our people are like worshiping God on a Sunday and then carrying on with their life for the rest of the week. They pray on their knees on a Sunday and on their neighbours the rest of the week. It's not. It isn't holy. It's just stupid. God is involved with the whole of life, and there's nobody teaching it except just a few of us. It's not coming out of the established church, sadly.
Well, the other thing, Stephen, came out of this was there was the panel on discussing what had been said, and in typical GB News fashion, they get a real lefty to access usually, and they get a traditional righty on the other side to give their views. And as usual, the lefty said, well, yes, there are lots of Muslims that are good, kind people. He said, but don't think about extremes. Now, the extremes he was referring to with the Hamas types on the Muslim side. And he said the other extreme, of course, is in America, where you've got these evangelicals. Now, evangelical is a bad word for people who want to get at Christians. Now, it's a label, but how can you compare an organization that murders people to get its own way with the most extreme evangelical Christian who's never said that, nor have any of the evangelical churches? But that's the dirt that is dug up constantly, and the word evangelical is used. And so people say, oh, if you're expressing your faith, you're evangelical, and therefore I'm not listening to you. It's very subtle, isn't it? Very clever.
I mean, yeah, but I think that Roddy, you're trying to apply logic to it, and it ain't going to respond to that. The reason that they put is evangelicals on that side is because they have to. They they have to have something to balance Hamas. They have to, and so they go for anything, clutching at straws. I mean, during the debate on assisted suicide in the House of Commons last week, or was it the week before last? Last week, uh, Mr. Ranson annoyed MPs by saying that some of the people who are opposing assisted dying were driven by religious convictions. And MPs were like, hang on, people with religious convictions are allowed to have a voice, and she was roundly denounced in the House of Commons from pretty much all sides. So those people who say, well, Christians should not be involved in politics, you should keep out of the public square. They say that because that leaves the public square just the province of Satan, the province of if you like, Hamas or the secularists. So yeah, my argument that I keep saying is that Jesus Christ, King of Kings, needs to be more than a line in a worship song. Us Christians have to believe that that is reality. Other people called Kings of Kings in the Bible are actual earthly leaders. Tidal, King of Nations, was one of the ones that Abraham fought against in Genesis, and Chedorlaomer, King of Kings. Nebuchadnezzar was a King of Kings. In other words, they rule over kingdoms of this world. Look, in the song, Messiah. The Hallelujah chorus from Messiah, Handel's Messiah, has takes out of the Revelation the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our God and of His Christ. That is why that's Christ. That's what Christ's ascension means. Is that He is seated at the right hand of power, and God rules all the nations. Jesus Christ rules all the nations. And Psalm 2 says, if they don't repent, they're going to be in trouble. But look, okay, it all sounds really bleak. But Psalm 2 also says, he that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, he will have them in derision. And I firmly believe that when we do the little things that only we can do, we can leave it to the Almighty to do what only He can do. But there is a teaching. I've just published a nano sermon called "The Lord Wants Your Help," and that's from Deborah and Barak's song in Judges chapter 5, where there was trouble happening more or less in northern Israel. Sisera and Jabin, the king, were oppressing the people, and Deborah sent up Barak to fight against Sisera, and he had huge success. Well, kind of, because he wouldn't go unless Deborah came with him. So she cursed him and said, "Well, you won't get the spoils of battle. A woman will kill your enemy." And the famous, that Judges chapters 4 and 5 is just full of these two incredibly feisty women. The one who drives a tent peg through Sisera's temple as he sleeps. Whoa, and I don't want to come across her in a dark alley. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, there was one city right in the middle of the conflict zone called Meroz, and the people would not come out. They would not join the fight, even though they were right in the conflict zone, and they were cursed. Curse ye, Meroz, says the angel of the Lord, not even Deborah, the angel of the Lord, curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. So the Lord needs your help, Ronnie, my help, the help of everyone watching this, every viewer. The Lord needs your help to come against the oppressors of today. That is the elites, the people who are oppressing us, the people who are passing bad laws, forgetting the people, enriching themselves at our expense. We need to come to the help of the Lord against the mighty, or we'll suffer the curse of Meroz. In other words, Christianity is a doing game. It's not just about personal salvation. It's about sticking it to the man, to grab an expression from a few years ago. It's about standing up for righteousness, praying for our leaders, and witnessing to them to repent and turn to the King of Kings.
Stephen, run out of time completely. Fascinating stuff. Thanks a lot. We will see you very shortly.
Bless you, Rodney.